Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host. Today on the show, we'll be discussing the 5 movies nominated by the Directors Guild of America in the category of Theatrical Feature Film, specifically discussing those films from an assistant director point of view. This episode kicks off our coverage of awards season, 11 episodes over the next 4 weeks, and each episode will feature film crew discussing nominees within their area of technical expertise. We tried this for the first time last year, and it was a lot of fun. I hope you'll stick around for the series. Let me introduce today's guests. For better or worse, I'm joined by the same panel as last year. Katie Carroll, you're a member of the Directors Guild, and you work as a first AD. It's possible your appearances on Below the Line are second only to my own, and we'll know for sure once I finish loading all of the back episodes into IMDb. Katie, welcome back.
Thanks, Skid. Happy to be back.
Glad to have you. Next, Bill Hardy. You're also a member of the DGA. We're friends from my earliest days as a DGA trainee in LA. And while you haven't done as many episodes as Katie, you're always welcome on the show. Nice to see you again.
Hey, Skid. Thanks. Glad to be here.
And finally, in our fourth chair, Shaun O'Banion. You are still not a member of the DGA, but you have maintained your Producers Guild of America membership, I'm told, since last year. Glad you're able to join us again.
Thanks very much for having me. I apologize to everyone for not being a DGA member.
Well, we're going to give you another pass, but at some point, we're going to see. And we're going to maintain the option of introducing you last every time, no matter how else we organize this. Perfect. But Shaun, I know you got another project in the works. Tell us a little about it before we dive into this.
Yeah, so we don't have a date yet for a premiere, but I have, inspired by you, of course, Skid, I've decided to put my toe in the podcast waters, and we're going to debut a show called Character, probably in the late summer, in which we get the opportunity to speak with a lot of great actors whose faces everyone will definitely know, whose names they may not know, but whose roles they will definitely have appreciated.
Shaun, that sounds like a great show. Definitely let us know, and we'll remind people when it comes out. Good luck getting it going there.
Thanks.
Okay, before we dive into our nominee conversation, let's take a few minutes to review the DGA nomination process itself. I'll outline the basics. Early each year, every DGA member can select what they consider to be their top 5 films from a list of all eligible contenders from the previous calendar year. Now, 2021 had a wider eligibility window because of the pandemic, but this year is the exception, not the rule. Using a system of ranked choice voting, the top 5 films are presented to the membership for a second vote, where each DGA member can select a single film, and whoever receives the most votes is declared the winner. Ranked choice voting is not used in the final round. Do any of you have thoughts about how this process worked out during the pandemic?
The biggest thing I had was having seen almost no movies just because, no movies were out. And I have a whole thing about going to the movies and versus watching it at home. So I ended not even doing the initial round of votes because I hadn't seen anything. So I'm just doing the second round, having watched all the nominees.
Well, I think it's an interesting push-pull on that, Katie, right? Because there's generally an encouragement to see movies in the theaters. That was wiped out. And I do think there was quite a bit, though, of streaming opportunities this year. I think this year I had more streaming notices even than I received DVDs in the mail. Although for some things I still received both, and there's a pile of the DVDs as well. But there seemed to be a push to get things out through streaming. But again, it's not the theater experience.
I think it was very ironic that I got more DVDs from Netflix than anything else. I think I got 18. I stopped counting at some point, but I mean, I was just, the environmentalist in me was just so bothered, really. I'm like, who doesn't have Netflix? And can that one person please just let Netflix know so they can get the DVDs?
I do think that's like Netflix, like the studios who are shipping DVDs do, they trigger off a membership list, and there is no cross-reference to who's actually got Netflix in their home. I did have a time where my internet dropped out, and I was able to watch, I think, One Night in Miami on DVD because Amazon had sent it to me as well, and I felt like watching it the afternoon when I didn't have internet. But generally, there is a lot of overlap there. I do think bringing up Netflix ties in another point that I want to share, and that is a theory that because the large studios who have by the numbers Oscar plans were all frozen this year with the pandemic, it basically created an opportunity where we are seeing a lot of smaller films just get attention because otherwise the oxygen would have been sucked out of the room. But again, it's a theory. What do you guys think?
I think you're right.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good
like
enough for me.
Hulu.
We can. Thank you, Katie.
Moving
We can
on.
move on. We can move
End
on.
episode.
Thank you. That's a. Sorry,
Well,
Katie. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. Hulu and Amazon and Netflix, they stuck with whatever their plans were, and they released as they had planned. And they have you're right, the smaller movies. So they probably were, for better or for worse, pandemic was a boon for them. And they're like, hey, great, we'll just keep getting our more subscription members and more people watching our stuff. And they probably did better for it. And yeah, their movies actually did better for it too. They got more eyes.
I kept wondering about Nomad Land. Was that still out? Like, I saw it appear on Hulu, and at that point, all I had was a DVD for it. So then I just streamed it on Hulu. I wondered if it was still available for the 1999 rental or whatever, or if it was suffering for people that didn't have Hulu subscriptions because it seemed to appear earlier.
I think they did leave that, in like the iTunes and whatnot, or Walmart's. I think people still had access to it, even if they weren't a subscriber of one of the streamers. I don't necessarily know if that's the case for something like, Sound of Metal or One Night in Miami. I don't know if Amazon was making that same play, but I think they were trying to drive subscribers to the Amazon service. But I don't know. I mean, you sort of almost figure Amazon has people anyway, right? Because they're all shopping there. So
I do realize that whether it's because of my membership in the guild or just because I subscribe to a lot of streaming services, I'm disinclined to find and pay for a movie individually streaming. I will, when theaters open back up, I will again go to a single movie and see it in the theater. In fact, look forward to that. But to charge me extra for a single movie at home, I feel like there's a lot of other streaming activity, to catch my eyes. And I don't pay a lot of attention to sort of that layered rollout, if you will, where it's $20 or $30 up front, and then it becomes something less, and then it finally goes to a streaming service. That I don't notice where there's a difference in that or what the strategies might be.
yeah, I'm not really on the Disney Plus model now, which they just announced that Black Widow from Marvel is going to be like a premium purchase on their service that you already pay for, and that's I'm like, well, I'll wait the 3 months.
Plus, that one's getting released in the theaters, and in July, I might actually feel safe going to a theater, even like midweek or something. That feels like a big screen to me. I really want to see that one on the big screen.
For sure.
Fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's talk about the nominees for this year. I will announce them in order, alphabetically by director's last name. And for listeners, by the way, there may be spoilers for these films. First up, Minari, directed by Lee Isaac Chung. What did you guys think of this film?
I loved it. That was the last one. I watched all 5 this week. I hadn't seen any. So I just kind of went through and watched all 5. And that was the one I watched last night. Loved everything about it. Beautiful. And really great story told well.
One vote from Katie. What do you guys think?
I feel like I was the counterpoint to all of Katie's opinions last year. So, yeah, my initial reaction was, oh, this is the movie about how horrible marriage is and how your mother-in-law will destroy your life and burn it to the ground the first chance she gets. And
I'm not married, so maybe I don't bring that to it.
Yeah, neither am I. I honestly said your mother when I was like, yeah, your mother will just burn your life to the fucking ground the first chance she gets, man. But I didn't like hold it against the movie. I was just like, yeah, man. I really liked it too. I liked it. I just it's the I don't know. I'm not sure what it didn't have. Like the things that I always just go that it's production value, that there's something in AD back of my head where I'm like, there wasn't a lot. There weren't no big crowd scenes. It was a lot of a field. And then those are like what in my mind I go, it's a nice little movie. And I'm not sure whether that's insulting or not. Like in my mind, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It just tells me the mood that I need to be in to watch it and appreciate it.
Yeah, I like the film, but I also, there were some things that, I love Will Patton usually, but I almost felt like he was at a different level than everybody else in the film. Like, I mean, I know the character's like, he's speaking in tongues but even the comb over and the Coke bottle glasses and stuff, I was just kind of like, I don't know. I feel like he's just acting on another plane. This is like a really simple told story, and he's kind of going into Characterville. But I did like it, and I'm a huge fan of Steven Yeun, so I will pretty much watch anything that guy does. And I also thought that the relationship, especially between the little kid and the grandma, was really sweet.
Sean, if you get Patton on your show, you can ask him what was going on with that.
Yeah, he's on our list. He's definitely on the list.
You can come back on that. And I also really appreciated the film. I'm happy to see it on a lot of lists. Was a little underwhelmed with how it unfolded, and AD perspective, it does seem like a simpler film to get pulled together. At the same time, it looks very low budget, and there's challenges in low budget filmmaking, no matter what, as an AD and trying to keep on their schedule. It doesn't look like they've got a lot of days to shoot it. Just a couple of background scenes and most of the stuff out at the farm and in the field.
But
and
the
that trailer.
Kids are in everything.
That's a good point.
And that kid is a young kid. So you got 6 hours with him at best?
Unless you're shooting it in Kansas, maybe the rules are different. If you're Kansas, it's your non-signatory, maybe it's different.
I actually looked, I was curious, and they shot in Oklahoma. And the other side of it was like how difficult it would be to AD a movie where the vast majority of the language is not necessarily a language you speak. Like, I have no idea if the script supervisor spoke Korean. Like, at what point are we resetting? What's going on? Like, if the Korean director is speaking to the actors, maybe in a different language, and you're trying to figure out what is going on. I mean, I've done shows in Mexico with Mexican directors and actors, and my high school Spanish starts to get a little bit better, but Korean's a whole different ballgame. And at what point are you just trying to keep track of what is going on the set?
And then you also have the fact that the writer-director was Steven Yeun's cousin.
Really?
Yeah, which Steven Yeun, I think, didn't even realize at the time he got the offer. They were like, "Oh, your cousin's making a movie," and he was like, "Who's my cousin?" And they were like, "Lee Isaac Chung."
Is this the movie that was debated for whether it was a foreign language film?
Exactly.
I kept thinking that as I was watching it. And if we concede that it's a foreign language film, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter. When we were talking about perspective last year, or when I rambled on about it, at least, affects the Will Patton character, Sean. If you think about it, he's, I don't want to say comic relief, but he's definitely the crazy white person. And because he's the one of the only English speakers too, it already sets him aside from a story standpoint into a special category of that's the crazy guy. I thought, I really liked Will Patton in it too, because he made me laugh. I just can't.
There was a certain point. I think there's a scene where he takes Steven Yeun into his place, and I was like, "Is this turning into a murder movie? Is Will Patton going to murder him and then hang him on a cross or something?"
Yeah, there was a close up of his hands at what point, and I was like, "I don't. Oh, that did not. Oh, yeah, that just gave me the willies. His hands. I was like, I can't."
This director, though, he went to Yale. This is an American story. And I think this is an interesting, and is at the heart of the debate, Bill, I think, about where this thing belongs. Because to put into a foreign language, even into the foreign language category, I think it actually takes away from it on some level and we'll talk about this, going on as well. But there's something about just the zeitgeist and Americana that I think this film does really capture in a powerful way. And it would be interesting, again, to see how that all comes together on set.
And again, I'm also a fan of Steven Yeun, mostly just from Walking Dead. But other than that, and I would scan those credits looking for any name I might know, just even tangentially, and nobody. I'm guessing it was a non-union crew, probably still DGA, but non-union IATSE crew or non-IATSE crew. So
yeah, it was pretty small. I do know that. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes these smaller films, they're non-DGA, but then when they get nominated, they get offered the opportunity to come on board. I know that happened with 8th Grade, where they were not DGA when they filmed, but then they had an opportunity after that, or were recognized as the ADs, even though it was non-union when they did it. We should just go check the credits, because if they don't separate their names in the credits, Then it wasn't
They
DGA
did.
when they made it, but they are
They did.
separated. So
Mhm.
that's right. Katie watched it like this week. All right. So
Last night.
for all the packaging information that we don't remember, we'll just we'll ask Katie. So, okay. Well, again, so that suggests they were DGA at the time. Well, let's move on to the second film on our list, Promising Young Woman, directed by Emerald Fennell. What did you guys think of Promising Young Woman?
You also have to take into account that 3 of the 4 of us are men for this particular film. But for what little my opinion matters, I loved Promising Young Woman. I thought it was fantastic, and my uncomfortableness throughout my entire watching was what the entire viewing was really what solidified that for me. I'm like, for this movie to have the level of visceral effect it was having on me as I watched it, I was just so uncomfortable the entire time, and it was amazing. I mean, like it was a full body experience for the viewing. I think a lot of guys are gonna have to take 10 minutes to realize what's bothering them about the movie before they're going to be able to continue on 15 minutes in. I think there's the entire Me Too thing is just crammed into this 1 hour and 45 minutes in a really interesting conversational kind of way that I liked. Had a big effect.
Yeah, I think it probably was my favorite of all 5. It's probably the one that's going to get my vote. And I liked how it showed the whole rainbow of various sexual harassment, sexual assaults, how anything can happen, and how you view it with a different prism can affect everything. So you have to be aware of what is going around you, who is with you, who is not with you, what is happening. And without sounding too pedantic, the entire movie is a teachable moment that doesn't feel like a teachable moment. And the twist at the end, I did not know that's how it ended. And I kind of loved that very, very much.
Yeah, that twist, I was like, wait, what? Did they really? No, come on, that's not. And then I was
kept
like, oh
waiting
my God,
for one last thing. And no, that's actually
yeah.
happening.
Yeah, even like, you're waiting for the Carrie moment, right? And I was like, okay, that's the end of the movie. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I felt, I mean, I have nitpicks with kind of all the movies on the list this year, but I thought they did a really good job. I thought Emerald Fennell, like, she's been kind of groomed for a while. She comes through the Phoebe Waller-Bridge thing through the TV show Killing Eve, where they made her the showrunner, and then she was on The Crown playing Camilla Parker Bowles, and there's been this groundswell of upward momentum for her, and then to see this her first feature come out like this, and you're like, wow, you handled that very well.
Yeah, it's a tricky story told well.
The casting is really interesting too. You mentioned 8th Grade, and I think isn't the sort of love interest the guy that directed 8th Grade? Bo Burnham.
Bo Burnham plays character in this, and you're right, he was the director in 8th Grade. I got mixed feelings about it. They were not triggered from the beginning of the film. I was actually all in when it started, and I liked the way the story was told. I think a couple of things tweak on me. I don't particularly like the way the ending twists and the way it plays out, and it reminds me of a dislike I have for another film that might even be on the 2021 list, but that people are talking about with I Care a Lot, where the ending doesn't quite make up for me kind of the where things go and get there. Like, it's not enough as far as how things balance out with the twist on this. And then I also think, and not knowing sort of Emerald's background and where she came through, when I was like, oh, right, Killing Eve, I'm one of the maybe few people that really dislikes the second season of Killing Eve. And I think there's some of a similar sort of heavy-handedness in the way that Promising Young Woman comes together, not because of the topics or, what we're talking about, or this, again, Katie, as you say, it's a teachable moment throughout, in favor of all that, but just something just about the tone and the attitude didn't sit as well with me. But no opposition to it being here. I think it comes together with a lot of difficult elements in a way that's very, very watchable, right? For a film, on its topic and where it's going. I'm impressed by it.
Tonally, it's a very fine line to walk. And I kind of agree with you, Skid, in like without saying what that reveal is, there are things happening peripheral to that reveal or just before where it kind of gets a little broad, more broad than anything else in the movie, you know, because it rides this line of like dark comedy to like, this is real stuff we're talking about in the world. And I think in some of those instances, she hadn't really stuck the landing, but overall, I've enjoyed it.
It's a little bit of a difference in what you can do with a smaller budget, with slightly more budget. You can get better, well-known actors who really only have one scene, maybe two, and then they can really stick the landing with the ones like Connie Britton's scene is so great. I love that scene. And probably a day of filming, she probably made some decent bank. If not, then like some back end deal, whatever it was. But, you know, it was worth it for a day. Oh, I have a day. I can come do this scene and knock it out of the park. And you get this well-known, again, character actor who can nail this role. And there's so many smaller parts, like the parents, Clancy Brown and Jennifer Coolidge.
Coolidge, yeah.
So great. And Jennifer Coolidge also like known more for comedic side. And yes, she is comedic in this, but in a really heartfelt way. And then just the sadness at the end with the two of them just really also hit home. I just felt so bad for them and their feelings towards their daughter. Like that's something about what you can do with a small budget, with the right connections to get it in the hands to the right actors who, you know, can take your small movie to the next level.
Yeah, even somebody like Laverne Cox doesn't have much to do as the owner of the place that she works at, the lead works at, but still she's a welcome presence. And, you know, anytime you get those kind of people, you're like, oh, cool. Okay. You know, every little role suddenly matters a little more because you have some familiarity with the person.
Exactly.
Do you think with that kind of cast, does it shrink your shooting schedule? Like, because you bring in folks who know it really well, there's a lot of different sets, but there's not a lot of crazy sets, right? Like, so this movie's pretty contained, probably doing a couple of weeks. What do you guys estimate?
Probably, yeah. Maybe 4 weeks, give or take.
Yeah, I mean, like 25 days, something like that, 23 days.
Sounds about right. Yeah, and with each of these known actors, like if you only get them for a day or two, they're going to nail their scene. They know, like, even if they have a lot of dialogue, they're going to come in and just knock it out of the park in just 2 days. And with limited sets, like you're not going to go crazy with your shots. You're not going to suddenly create a walk and talk because you don't have the set to do a walk and talk. So it's more about finding the tone and where these characters are coming from than creating these elaborate shots. So it's more about the discussion of acting.
For her having just come off the Killing Eve, like she's able to more, you know, quickly pick her shots and I think move at speed, which probably greatly helped her pull this movie off.
And a lot of these actors, even though they are well known, a lot of them come from the TV world. So they're not scared of doing 5-6 pages in a day, 7 pages in a day if they have to. And they'd rather maybe do that and sign on for 1 day than, hey, I don't know if I can do a page a day and now you shoot 7 days. Like, no, let's just do it in 1 day, get it done, over with. I have some fun and we move on.
Now, it is interesting that the team that's nominated has a UPM and 2 second ADs, but no first, which I think is intriguing. And there must be some kind of story there about why the first AD isn't on their team. Bill, you're laughing.
Yeah, that's I can tell you right now, that's probably a story where one of those UPMs is going, why are they talking about it? Stop talking about it. There was a first AD. It was fine. I know I've been there.
Emerald's coming at this from her experience on TV. Don't you think it'd be odd to try and do this in that kind of low budget a manner, Bill?
I wouldn't be surprised if being focused on the TV world, I hadn't even thought about that. That probably helped this movie move along at a nice clip across the board.
We'll move on to the next film on our list, Mank, directed by David Fincher.
This was my favorite, personally.
I would have guessed that coming out of the gate. Yeah, go ahead, Bill. Tell us, Bill, what you liked about this.
I mean, you know, Citizen Kane and stuff. I mean, the whole movie, you know, I keep waiting for Fincher to have the movie where he starts off saying that I'm on the spectrum, and then the movie starts. I'm always looking forward to the way he's going to present his movie. It's always extra exciting to me. I couldn't tell if it was just because I was listening to the movie on the headphones. I was fascinated with the sound, just the fact that it sounded like I was watching a 40s movie in the theater, the way it was echoing on the soundtrack.
Well,
And
Bill,
it was
Bill, if I can make a pitch there, you should come back for our Oscar coverage when we talk about the nominees for sound next week. Please come back for that episode and give it a listen. But yes, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
what he said. Yeah. And I mean, and then once you're already, you go into black and white, you've got real people that you're trying, like the whole Orson Welles scene. I had never, I've totally forgotten the actor's name. Tom Burke. I was amazed at his Orson Welles. I ended up reading an entire article about how Orson Welles has been portrayed through cinema for the last 50 years and how every movie that has him in it being played by someone else is done a different way. And I think this guy he nailed the impression. If it's actually his voice, I think he nailed the impression as a Brit, especially. And we in cinema think of Orson Welles as our George Washington, as if there was never a movie made before Citizen Kane sometimes. And rightfully so in a lot of ways too, even if it was just the people that he pulled together to make his movies. I think he deserves the credit, but that Mank was one of those people. And I couldn't get enough of that story because I didn't know it. I knew the history behind who Citizen Kane was supposed to be about, but the level of involvement the writer had with Hearst in his real life, I had no idea about. And it just brought it all home for me that much more. All that daydreaming I've done about Rosebud, it gave me a something to focus on.
And I feel like we're going to line up on a spectrum on this one, but Shaun or Katie, I'll let you guys go first before. What do you guys think of Mank?
It's one of those where I felt like the parts were more than the sum of the whole. I don't know if that's the right phrasing. There's so many elements that I love. Like Bill, I hadn't really thought about the sound until you said it. I'm like, oh, that's very true. The images and how it was shot in black and white with the super powerful white light and how everybody was backlit, even with sun in their faces, and you could tell, but that was okay. Or it looked like it was on a sound stage, but that was okay because that's how they shot it in the 40s. And certain scenes that I loved are walking around Hearst Castle with the monkeys in the background. There's so many things I liked about it, but as a whole, I felt like I was missing something. And there are a couple of things that always just kind of rubbed me the wrong. One, it's not really about the making of Citizen Kane. It's about the writing of Citizen Kane. It almost ends when he hands Orson the script and says, okay, that's not the making of Citizen Kane. But on top of that, it's almost more about the politics around what went into the writing of Citizen Kane as opposed to, so like the politics part of it kind of rung true for now, which is one of the reasons I'm guessing Fincher decided to make it, because it's very, very apropos for now. One other thing, like Gary Oldman's a brilliant actor. I will never take that away from him. But at the very end, when he says, I'm 43, I laughed out loud alone in my house. You have a 65-year-old man playing a 43-year-old man. And he's saying in all earnestness, I'm 43. I'm like, God, I feel old. Are you supposed to look 65 when you're 43? I mean,
well, in fairness, people back then did look 65.
And that literally started to enter my mind. Like, oh, everybody looked older. It's like, so I was instantly out of the movie at that point, doing math and like looking up when was it? Like, I
was laughing just as you were, and then I stopped and went, well, Orson Welles was 24 playing a 70-year-old in Citizen Kane. So it's kind of a hat tip to that. And then I realized that I was just being a film student and stopped thinking. But I can justify anything. Everything you said is absolutely correct, Katie. It was not about making of the movie, and that's all I talked about there too. But yeah,
like I love the set scenes like that were on studio lots and how they used to do it, but how it's still a little bit the same, even like 100 years later. But also like when Davies is leaving one lot to go to the other lot, and they literally take her dressing room, and it's not just a trailer; it's a whole caravan. that part I love about it, but that's not the part that makes a movie really, really great. That's one element of why we like it.
I agree with Katie. I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge Fincher fan from the start. I'm a Gary Oldman fan. I knew going in that technically it was going to be stunning, and talking about being on the spectrum, like the attention to detail would just be off the charts. A friend of mine who's been working in the sound department at Lucasfilm for years told me that he was going to be doing this film. I've known him about 24 years, and I said, if you do that movie, you're getting nominated for an Oscar. And he got nominated for an Oscar. So when you said the sound, I was like, yeah, Jeremy, go Jeremy. Because he just knew, like, with Fincher in that period, it's his dad's script. Like, he's gonna just throw everything he's got at it. But I wasn't that intrigued by the story of Mank. I was more interested in the people that he kept coming into contact with. So, what's his name? Charles Dance as Hearst, and like any of those scenes in the ballroom and the whole thing, I was like, wow, man, this is amazing. And the technical stuff, yeah, I mean, I listened on headphones too, because I knew what to expect. And that's incredible. It feels like it was made then. If I didn't know who any of these actors were, I wouldn't know it was a modern thing, which is pretty impressive. But the story, I kind of was like, okay, that's fine.
You're also, it's the story of a crumbling alcoholic too. That's something I thought about a couple of times. The world is spinning around him, and as the writer, it's his take on what was happening, even if it's not factually correct in some cases. So that might just be another film school student justification, but I felt that it's just that Gary Oldman hair thing that's always falling down. Just he, even when he's sober, he still looks drunk because of it, I think, is where I'm headed with that.
Well, Bill, I'll pull on that thread a little bit in that I think if David Fincher, and I'm also a big fan of his past work, and so he got a lot of credit from me before the movie came out. I was really looking forward to this. If he had gotten that script and said, this is the story we want to tell about Mank, and again, I think the story is more about him. It's not about the making of Citizen Kane, and it is the ties with his father. I think if he'd gotten the script and said, let me suss this out and put this story in, those elements are great. But I think whether it's because it was his dad's original script or what, just sort of a reverence there or not reworking it enough. But I think a lot of the politics that Katie talked about that are relevant now were written then, but it starts to get confusing about what's true and not true. And even historically, you're doing all this effort to make it sound and look like it's done accurately, but your actual historical events do not line up with what you're presenting in the story, beyond just sort of like, well, this is how things kind of, simplified version for the movie. You spend more time, I think, even with the Hollywood stuff, when he starts telling Hollywood stories. I'm also a film buff, maybe not to your degree, Bill, but I find myself constantly dropping out to think, wait, what's the relationship between those people? And having to keep the computer open by my side, which makes it hard to concentrate on all the other elements of expertise that are coming together. I mean, on some level, I feel like it's sort of like if Cameron had the characters like picking up the silverware all the time, and we're like historically accurate everything. And I feel like it's sort of distracted, right, from what there was some really great character and story elements in there. And there's some amazing scenes in here. Let's talk about it from an AD perspective, with just the scenes like where they're all at dinner, all of those actors, plus the elements of background with your, the additional cast, and then the line in the rooms. That's a lot of work. There's a lot of work on this movie.
In costume, in period piece, then in costume. Like I looked at that dinner scene like, oh, Jesus Christ. That is my personal Vietnam right there.
Dinner scene, I think, weak shooting flat out, just minimum. As soon as you say dinner scene.
And then add in the Fincher, and it's 3 weeks.
Exactly. I was going to say the week until everybody gets up and leaves. And then you had another week until it's just the two of them talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I heard an interview I think Fincher interview Sorkin about Trial of Chicago 7 and vice versa. And Fincher said to him, so, how long did you have to shoot the riot scenes for Trial of Chicago 7? Like, 2 weeks or something? And he was like, no, I don't get a Fincher schedule. I don't know. He was like, no, no, I get like 2 days.
Well, you also don't necessarily get a Fincher team, because we were just talking about, wow, on Promising Young Woman, the team is surprisingly and mysteriously small. On Fincher's team, first AD, second AD, second, and not one, not two, but 3 full-time additional second ADs on that staff as far as putting that together. So, well, a lot of effort went into the film again. How it came together and what came out, we'll see what the voters think.
I did want to just add one more thing, because something you said, Skid, made me think of it. In the way that the detail that he uses detail and making you feel in the period, I never came out of Zodiac, his film about the Zodiac killer. I was so invested in that movie and those characters, and I was definitely absorbing the period, the 70s, and the design and stuff, but I never thought like, wait, what is that? Or is that, but I totally agree with you. In Mank, I really was sort of caught off guard by some of it and trying to put the math together.
You did mention him talking to Aaron Sorkin, who, not coincidentally, is the next director on our list for the Trial of the Chicago 7.
It's another one where it's like there are moments that I loved. And I am a Sorkin fan, but I'm more a Sorkin fan for his writing. I'm not sure that he's there as a director yet. He's learned at the feet of some really great directors, and he's still learning. But I mean, I've never met the man, so I don't know, but maybe he doesn't realize he's still learning yet because he's so well known as a screenwriter. Maybe, I don't know. But again, a lot of great moments. And I did like how they used the trial and they would flash to different moments in Abby Hoffman doing the stand-up. And I liked how they used that intercut of it all, but it still felt a little lacking to me. But I don't know why. I can't figure out why.
I think that whenever I start daydreaming about Aaron Sorkin, and yes, I do daydream about Aaron Sorkin, A Few Good Men. There was a lot of time where, started, if people don't know, started as a play. So he was able to work that courtroom shit out on stage. And then I felt it was a lot more stagey than his last decade, 15 years of work. I think a lot of aspects of this could easily transfer to the stage. And that's a movie, and I'm talking about a movie that's got mob scenes too. I was there. I understand what you're saying, that it was, it felt a little disconnected too, but it was, once you bring in the flashbacks from the courtroom, that's when it all tied together for me. I felt disjointed in the first half of the movie, but then I felt more like I was being presented it as an investigator or a jury member of the event. So I wasn't able to see the whole picture until the end of the story. Does that sound like a complete thought?
Yeah. It does. I'm also kind of curious, like how much he looked at the transcripts, like how real is this? Because some of those comments, and I'm a fan of different podcasts that are true crime podcasts, and I listen to all the wrongfully convicted, so I get into the heads of all the lawyers of how they're doing. Like, holy crap!
Well, yeah, the Julius Hoffman scene, for example, with Bobby Seale, that's direct It's insane that happened.
Not just literally every word out of that judge's mouth, like mistrial. How? Oh my God! And
yeah, and it's all that's the transcript stuff is, from what I've heard, really legit to what happened, and it's astonishing. Yeah, I actually think it may be weird to say it, but I think his first film as a director, Molly's Game, was a better directed film. And I also think in something like this, Netflix was the variable, right? Because if this was a focus movie or something like that, you would have been like, well, of course, this is their prestige entry for the season. And so you kind of go in with maybe a heavier expectation of what it's going to present. And I feel like, yeah, what Katie said, I agree with, that there are moments within it that are really brilliant. A lot of them, I think, to do more with the dialogue he gave the actors and then the performance the actors gave than the direction of the specific moment, if that makes sense.
Flashing to A Few Good Men, like if this were still written by Aaron Sorkin but directed by Rob Reiner, I can't even fathom how different it would be. And I think it would be a better movie.
And it was supposed to be Spielberg, right? It was Spielberg's idea 8 years ago or something like that. Spielberg brought him in and said, what about Trial of Chicago 7? And as Sorkin tells it, he didn't even know about it. And he was like, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I would love to do that. And left the room and called his dad and said, what the hell's the Chicago 7? And his dad explained it. And then he was like, okay, well, I guess I just agreed to write it for Spielberg. And then, all these years later, he makes the movie as director. And actually, Sacha Baron Cohen was the link as well back then, because Spielberg said, I want Sacha to play Abby.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw that he was a producer on it as well. So I thought that was interesting.
I think my issue with Sorkin's sort of directorial career in general is that his script doesn't get reinterpreted and softened in a way that when another director does the work, it does. Either he reinforces his own ticks and quirks in writing as the director in a way that just, I think it was finely tuned and well honed on West Wing. But then since then, I feel like, particularly as he does these historical dramas, they sound too much like West Wing for me to still think that this is what's accurately happening in a historical piece, and that I'm just uncomfortable with it in kind of the way where he presents things and where he emphasizes it. I mean, for some reason, it doesn't really come together for me with him as a director. Interestingly, I think that while the DGA awards are often a precursor for the Oscars in Best Director, Sorkin is not nominated by the Oscars in this category. And so were he to win, it would be a standalone with the DGA.
Well, first off, I think that you are just having traumatic flashbacks listening to Aaron Sorkin dialogue where you're trying to send crosses in the background. You're like,
having worked the show, you're saying that I can't get out of that. That's fair.
As your fans, as your long-term fans will know, you have many West Wing episodes. And
you're like, Aaron, just give me a pause. Just one pause, man.
I need to think of Richard Attenborough in The Great Escape. We could be getting dozens out in this darkness.
Well, interesting on the balance of his team. There's a regular group of ADs, but he's got 3 UPMs assigned to the movie. So whether they shifted it in time or whether it was just that large dealing with Netflix and DreamWorks both on this, I don't know. Other thoughts on the Trial of Chicago 7? It's a big movie. I mean, there's a lot of work going on. They're not on the team full time, but they had a bunch of additional ADs out there running background and all period background. And
they apparently went to that actual park and they did shoot there. And I actually was, given the scale I imagine Netflix gave them to work with, I was impressed with those scenes in the riot sequence, because you could have said, well, we'll get archival footage from this. We'll get newsreel footage and we'll just kind of play it out that way. And we'll either, CG our actors into it or whatever. But the fact that they went for it, and I felt that those sequences were pretty effective, actually, and well handled by him for somebody who hadn't done anything. I mean, he's a guy who likes to just have people talk in rooms, which is most of the movie. But those couple scenes I was impressed with.
Let's talk about the last film on our list, Nomed Land, directed by Chloe Zhao.
It's a movie that I think it's going to sweep. I think it's going to take everything it's nominated for at the Oscars as well. I appreciate and sort of like the way that she works with non-actors and brings a lot of people into her films that feel of the world. They're just faces we don't get to see on screen very often. But at the same time, I guess I didn't really identify. I mean, I'm not a woman of a certain age, and this sort of idea of getting in a van and just living out in a, whatever, it never really got to me. In fact, so there's a moment where she's offered an opportunity to not have to live the life that she's living. It really would be a chance for her to settle down and live in a good place, in an actual home. And she chooses not to go that route. And for me, it just sort of, it really took me out. It made me, in a way, kind of dislike the character, because there didn't seem to be any reason for her not to accept that. Like it seems throughout the first half of the movie that she's looking for connection. And it reminded me of a similar thing in Into the Wild, Sean Penn's film, where this guy is on the road and people keep presenting him, you know, chances to have a different life, and he keeps sort of passing on it. And there's no real rhyme or reason to why. And it just sort of made me turn on the character, I guess.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, that van life actually does appeal to me a little bit, but more conceptually. Because I would go more with a small RV that actually has a shower and the washer dryer in it, as opposed to like there was a moment where I thought, like, when was the last time she showered?
Yeah, but Katie,
like,
that would not be unlike the life you live as an AD now. Just
well,
traveling
at
from
least
place
get,
to place.
you know, an apartment or a hotel or whatever. And I hear what you're saying about like looking for connection. And I think she's sort of looking for connection, but she's looking for the reason to avoid the connection because of the connection she had with her former husband. She's a widow. And I think where the movie is lacking is we only really hear her describe her relationship with her husband before he passed in one scene. And she's talking about how great he was and how much the town loved him. But I think either we needed to hear it at least one more time, or how they met, or some other reason as to why she doesn't. It's not that she doesn't want this connection with David Strathairn. It's that it's the same kind of relationship. Like, she still wants more friendship. She still wants those connections, but it's another love connection. And I think we just miss what her former relationship was, because we never really know it. We don't see it. It starts after that. So for all of us, it's like, well, why wouldn't you? But I kind of understand what she's thinking of, like, okay, well, it's never going to measure up, and I'm only going to hold him as not measuring up. So that's not fair to him, but it's never explained to us. So maybe I'm just imagining that, but that's
that makes sense. That makes sense. But you also, I mean, I get the like tiny house living kind of vibe, and you see all these people converting school buses and stuff and putting in hardwood floors, and just like, yeah, there's something very freeing about just like hitting the road and get a job in whatever little town. But I also felt like Fern was not, I felt like she was out of options, you know. Yes. I mean, the van breaks down at one point, and she's got to, like, you know, make a deal with these guys to fix the carburetor or whatever, because the thing won't run. So that's why the house and the life with that character potentially represented, like, you can stop doing this thing where it's like living desperate day to desperate day. Almost more freedom. Yeah.
No, I totally get that. I think we just needed more explanation. But that being said, I also felt like this movie was a little bit too long. It's beautiful, but I think they probably could have done maybe one less sunset shot, one less vista shot. It's a lot of like selling the romanticism of being on the road, but not. There's a lot of like, okay, we see her crap in a bucket once, but no, let's show that that's a daily scenario. Like, doing it once, like, oh wow, that's kind of rough. It's like crapping in the woods. Like, oh, it's kind of sucks. Like, no, that's like every single day. That's your life. Like, let's take away some of the romanticism of this.
Well, that's funny, Katie, that you think that that's what they were selling. I don't think they're selling the romanticism of it at all. Shaun, coincidentally, I've watched Into the Wild actually very recently, a couple of months ago, and saw some comparisons on that. Whereas though Into the Wild definitely romanticizes, or sort of is trying to capture his spirit and, you know, leaving the grid, if you will. I think here, this was more a matter of sort of being forced into it with the economics and the situation. And Katie, I think the story of her relationship, I think you're absolutely right that what we don't see helps inform her sort of reluctance to form new connections beyond the superficial. But I also think the other powerful thing about this film is it's I think it's sort of a zeitgeist for the times, not that we're all on the road or, you know, forced to live this nomad lifestyle, but the sort of forced into our apartments, and, you know, a lot of people having economic issues. And I think there's a lot there that is captured intentionally or not about what's going on. And I think not even, you know, not wanting that lifestyle, but seeing that a lot of people are being forced into that lifestyle, I think it spoke to me. And I think, Shaun, the scenes that, you know, it's complicated, this sort of when to leave that lifestyle or not, or can she, or will she, or does she want to? But that didn't actually take me out of it. I do think it's a little long, but I think that the skill of sort of sussing this movie out of what they did is to her credit. It's hard to say for a team. I'll aside briefly here. Mary Kerrigan is the UPM. Mary Kerrigan is also listed as the first assistant director, and there are no other DGA members on this. And I feel like this is a small, we're going to go find our movie kind of thing, and then how it comes together. Bill,
I had a distinct. First off, am I remembering correctly? This was based on a book.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I'm going to guess that in the realm of Fast Food Nation and it's a fictionalized account of what I don't know what you would call it, like a documentary book.
Yeah, it is, and includes some of the people from the book,
right?
Playing themselves, basically.
Because I knew that everybody but Strathern and McDormand were real people. That also, it's a lot of the first 20 minutes of 2001. It's a lot of and Into the Wild's another great. It's a really nice thing to put your finger on there, Sean, because it's a lot of people standing in nature, looking around too, where in the book, it's not necessarily, you can't write a sunset no matter how hard you try. It struck me right off the bat as this is a very Errol Morris movie. Okay. Like, I don't know, people who don't know, like an Errol Morris documentarian is known for recreating things in his documentary. That's what it just felt like. The McDormand stuff was the recreation, and anytime anybody else talked, it felt like a documentary to me. For my take on it, when people were romanticizing the road, I started to debate whether they were romanticizing it for the fact that this was their only option anyway. And that's how you justify it. That's how you get up in the morning when you got to take a shit in a bucket. It definitely had an effect on me. And at the same time, it was a little long, and I felt like you could have trimmed. It was, I was about to say, I guess you could have trimmed some of the main character out of the movie. And then at the same time, I'm like, but knowing what she went through, I mean, God, she's such a consummate actor that she's going to go and work at an Amazon facility or whatever she did and actually travel on the road for 3 months. I think she said at some point she realized she hadn't taken a shower or slept, and realized that maybe the performance needed to just get some sleep. Try acting, as Laurence Olivier said.
To something you said, Skid, it never took me out, in terms of, I mean, I was still invested in the story. I think it's a testament to Frances McDormand, again, who's one of our greats. But it definitely, it just sort of put a divide between Fern and me as a viewer in this idea that, like, there was an opportunity. I haven't been back to LA in 3 years. I'm in LA now. I'm driving down the streets and I'm seeing literally like tent cities. Like, I mean, it was not great when I left, but now there's like tent communities. It's insane. So to think about this idea and what you were saying about how it correlates to kind of the way the world is right now and people being in dire straits, this idea that somebody would say, hey, here's this beautiful craftsman house, surrounded by trees, and you come live here. And that they would go, no, I'll stick with the bucket and my shitty van. It just sort of made me go, come on,
Yeah, the romanticism of being on the road in a tiny house. Like, I'll be the first to admit it. I love the concept. Still haven't done it.
Yeah,
and
the practicality is something else.
Exactly. And if I do it, it's by choice. I still have an apartment at home to come home to, and I'm only going to do it for a couple of months until I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm coming home. It's not forced by any means. So yeah, I agree with you on the force from it. Like, wow, I have to wake up. I have to shit in a bucket. Oh, but I'll look out at this lovely, lovely sunrise, and I'm going to try and put a good spin on it. But yeah, you're right. Like, having to live in a van is different than getting to live in a van.
Well, that's our take on Nomad Land, and runs the list of movies. Again, I think it's an interesting list of films. I think there's things to like and dislike about all the films this year. So
I think, yeah, one last thing. If I could say anything about these 5 films, it's that it's really nice that we're getting the variety that we're getting, not only in terms of the stories told, but the people that we're seeing reflected on the screen. From Korean to this younger white girl to a guy from the 40s to, 70s of freedom fighters or whatever, and then a woman in her 60s just trying to survive. I think it's a pretty good time to be a movie lover.
I think, Shaun, it's true on both sides of the camera. I mean, what we're seeing in front, and then to have two women on this list of directors, the DGA, and I think similarly they're both on the Oscar list as well. So it's nice to see that. Thanks everybody for being here, guys. It was great talking.
Thanks, kid.
Good to see y'all again.
Yay.
That's a wrap for this episode. Join us again on Thursday for part 2 of our DGA coverage, where we're discussing the nominees for First Time Director. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. I really appreciate your feedback. You can send email comments to skid, S-K-I-D, at belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us reach new listeners. And new listeners, the best way to peruse previous episodes is at our website, belowtheline.biz. More than 70 episodes available. Maybe we talked about one of your favorite shows. If you're on Facebook, you can find photos and other behind-the-scenes materials at Podcast Below the Line. And finally, you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Pod Below the Line. Thanks to Curtis Five for our music and John Wan for our logo. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. As always, thanks for listening.